Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the lesson on making the offer. How to make the offer, how to structure it, what to say, what to do, how to breathe, how to eat, how to sleep in making the offer on a house that looks like, that we do our numbers and looks like might be a good fit for us. How do we make the offer, right? So at this point, we've received a property. We've determined the after repair value. We've estimated the rehab costs. And we've plugged it all into our calculator. We've come up with our offer price. So what do we do now? And I kind of prefaced it already. It is time to make that offer, you guys. If the property is on the market, this is what the information that we're going to email our realtor. First off, the address of the property, 123 Main Street. The offer price, $190,000. The EMD amount, the deposit amount. The inspection time frame. And the closing time frame, along with the buyer information and additional instructions that we write in. So here's what the email is kind of going to look like. Hi, realtor. Hi, Kim, the realtor. Thank you for sending this information. And this is in response to them sending us comps. This carries on from the last communication being the comps that we receive. Per the script. So. Hi, realtor. Thank you for sending this information. We'd like to make an offer through you for 123 Main Street in Anytown, California. Please forward over a contract via email for electronic signature using the below information. Address, 123 Main Street. Offer price, $100,000 cash. EMD, $1,000. Inspection time frame, 10 days from written acceptance. Closing time frame, 21 days from written acceptance. Buyer, Jake Flips LLC or designated entity. Additional information. Please write in as is, where is, with all faults, and buyer may obtain a private loan with no appraisal contingencies. All right, so let's go over what each of those mean if you don't know already. So the EMD, and we've talked about that previously just a little bit, but it's an earnest money deposit. It's a deposit that's made in good faith as a placeholder. And it's held with the closing agent or the escrow agent or the closing attorney. It's totally refundable, but it's a placeholder that you hold there while you go through your inspection period, while you go and you go and you do your due diligence. It's held there, and it's totally refundable unless you go past your 7 or 10 or whatever amount of days you agree upon as your inspection period. Even if you go past that inspection period, usually the seller will ask you to sign something that says that you give up your deposit or you waive your inspection contingency period, or you give up your contingencies. There's all sorts of different type of terminology, but usually you have to sign a piece of paper that says that I hereby give up my contingencies. Everything is in good and fine shape, and my deposit is not refundable. 90% of the time, I don't even sign that. Like I said, it's a placeholder. It's a placeholder while you do your due diligence on the deal, while you go into FBI mode as an investigator and really figure out what's going on with the property. And I usually start my EMD at about $1,000, where sometimes it's a little bit higher and sometimes it's a little bit lower. But I start with $1,000, then I let the seller negotiate me up higher if they want a higher EMD. And it's usually due within a few days of the contract acceptance. And it's always negotiable. Just like everything in real estate, all of this stuff is negotiable. You could say, I'm going to put a $250 EMD. However, I'd say usually $1,000 or $2,000, especially when dealing with the middle of the market, is usually a good starting point. Sometimes they'll negotiate me up to $2,500 or up to $5,000. Sometimes there's certain foreclosures where they ask for 10% as a deposit. So it varies, right? When I first started, I didn't have the money. A couple deals in, I was putting some of my own money into deals right at first there, and I didn't have the money, and I offered $200,000 on a property, and it was actually a HUD property, which means it's a federal government foreclosed home. And they said in order for me to offer on it, I had to put $20,000 in as my earnest money deposit. And I didn't have $20,000 that I felt comfortable putting in as a placeholder at the time. And so I ended up backing out of the deal because of that. But it is negotiable, and you don't have to move forward if you can't figure out the money, or if you don't have the money. You don't have to move forward. But usually it's due within a couple of days. Usually it's like 72 hours or 3 business days from when your offer gets accepted, or when you come to a joint acceptable contracted price. And yeah, again, it's negotiable. And usually with an EMD, you put together a photocopy of a check. It's really weird how it does it. I still don't understand why they do it. But this is one that I use. I've obviously blanked out all the important information, but you go in, keep the date blank. You have blank title company, $1,000, 1,000 is zero, for EMD, and then sign your name. It's very, very interesting, but this is what they use in order to submit offers oftentimes. Now, your inspection period is the number of days that you're going to give yourself, or that you're going to agree to use to investigate the property. Usually it's within 7 and 14 days from the written acceptance, meaning the day that the seller accepts your offer. And you can usually back out before this period is over. I mean, that's what an inspection period is. It's your contingency period. You put your deposit down as good faith while you're spending these 1 to 2 weeks looking into it. And obviously what we do, and we're going to get into it more at length or in depth later in the week when we go through the DD process, but you can back out before the period's over. No harm, no foul. You get your money back, and they can put it back on the market. You do all due diligence and investigations during this time frame. And this is also negotiable. Sometimes, we'll write in 10 or 14 days as an inspection period, and they'll come back and they say, we want a 5-day inspection. I'm fine doing any number of inspection period as long as I have enough time to get some of my contractors into the house to give me accurate numbers. I'm totally fine with it. Now, at first, you want to keep it between 7 and 14 days. I don't want to see you on your first deal going under 7 days. That gives you enough time to get contractors in, contact lenders, determine whether or not it's a good deal. So the closing time frame is the amount of time needed to actually close on the deal, from the day that your offer is accepted to the day that you own the property. So usually we write anywhere between 15 and 30 days from written acceptance. I typically start off with 21 days and let a seller negotiate me down. So let's say I say, hey, I'll give you $100,000, $1,000 EMD, and 21-day close with a 14-day inspection time frame. They can come back and say, well, you know what, that doesn't work for me. I like to give them a lot of different things to negotiate me back on outside of the price point, because the price point is the most important in my opinion. And so in a situation like that, I'll go in and I'll give them bait to negotiate me on the earnest money deposit, or negotiate me down on the closing time frame. So if I say, look, I'll pay $1,000 or $100,000 for this, and say, okay, well, you know what, if you want it for that price, you better do a 7-day inspection period with a 14-day closing time frame. And you know what, we'll ask you to increase your deposit from $1,000 to $2,500. If they do that, it's like you took the bait, done. Because the main thing that mattered was I just want that $100,000 price point. Now, sometimes you make that offer and they'll accept it exactly like you make the offer, and that's also very awesome. But everything's negotiable. It's not separate from the inspection time frame, meaning if you have say a 7-day inspection period and a 21-day close, the first 7 days of your 21-day close are your inspection period, and then the final 14 days are the closing time frame. So they're not two separate clocks that begin ticking. One when the closing time frame doesn't start ticking once the inspection time frame is over. They both start ticking at the same time, and one of them just ends up running out of time a little bit more quickly. Like I said, the clock begins ticking once the contract is mutually signed. It's not from the day you send the offer. It's from the day that your offer is accepted, or that all terms are accepted and mutually signed. So both signatures are on the document. And like I said, everything is negotiable. So the buyer, this is who's making the offer. And I always recommend, and I always include, if I put, Jake's Entity LLC, I'll put or designated entity. I'll put that after the buyer name. This allows me to switch the buyer name without an addendum to the contract or an additional document added onto the contract. The reason that we'll bust this out is because let's say we write a 10-day inspection period, and after 7 days, we just can't get our numbers to work, or we can't find a gap funder or something like that. We can always try to go out there and negotiate a wholesale, right? We can go out to somebody else and say, hey, look, this doesn't work for me. Do you want it? I have it locked in. Sell it to you for $107,000. So if I have it locked in at 100 and somebody else locks it in at, buys the contract from me at 107, then I get that difference of $7,000. You just always need to be prepared to provide entity documents. So if you're writing it as, Jake Flips LLC, I need to provide documentation that that's a legal entity. So if you don't have your entity yet, obviously I would advise getting an LLC or a corporation. Look online. I am not an attorney. There's very strict laws against me giving legal advice, which is why the legal and accounting thing is something I can't ever really tell you what to do. But I have an S Corp. I've flipped under an LLC before. You can also flip under your personal name. I would recommend against that for liability purposes, but don't let that stop you from starting. You can say, you can write an offer as John Smith or designated entity. And if somebody ever questions you about it, just say, just let them know, every once in a while, depending on time frame and depending on when the offer gets accepted, every once in a while, I'll switch it to a different one of my entities, which is why I write it like this. And sometimes they'll say, we don't want an assignable contract. We want you to just have, they may say, look, I'll take the 100 grand, but you got to get rid of the or designated entity and instead just buy it as John Smith or just buy it as Jake Flips LLC. In which case, if that's the case, it doesn't allow me to wholesale it as a second line of defense, but I can still move forward if I have if the numbers work, that's totally fine. It's not a problem. It just gives the seller something else to give me a counter offer on outside of just, just the purchase price. I'm trying to get them to negotiate on anything but the purchase price. Now, additional information. Now, we write this as an all-cash offer. We also, a lot of times, want to include the verbiage as is, where is, with all faults. That just means we're taking the property as it lies. We're not asking them to do anything to it before they sell the home to us. And we also put in, the buyer may obtain a private loan with no appraisal contingencies. This allows us to use our private lenders or our hard money lenders without the seller being confused and thinking that, that we're going to have to go and get a bank appraisal and underwriting and all that stuff. You may even want to add in, if they give you flack about this or give you pushback, just put, well, we could put all of the terms remain the same. Just buyer may obtain a private loan because we may have a third party coming in and bringing partial funds, and we don't want to scare anybody or mess with anything. I usually ask the real estate agent to hide this on additional info or on the third or fourth page of the contract. Either way, not a big deal. And there's been times where I've just wrote it all cash without putting this verbiage, and I'm still able to put in a loan, hard money loan, private loan. So this is just something that I do put in there just to make things easier, but it's not a deal breaker if you can't put it in there or if somebody asks you to take it out. Now, the realtor, usually when you're going to do this, the realtor will send a contract to sign. Read it before signing. Electronic signature is the easiest, so you don't have to print it out or use a scanner or use a pen or anything like that. And send it back. Shake out the nerves because you just made an offer on a house, and just keep making more offers, okay? If it's a wholesaler or if it's for sale by owner, we use the same structure as far as the inspection period and all the time frames and so forth, but we send a contract upon agreement, or the seller will send a contract template. We just need to make sure that we include all the correct information, all our information or designated entity, 10 days, 21 days inspection and closing time frame. Buyer may obtain a private loan with all of the terms remaining the same. Just make sure you follow this same structure every time, regardless of if a real estate agent, if we're instructing a real estate agent what to write on our behalf, or if we are putting a contract together ourselves. Approach that inspection period the same way, either way. So a POF, and we've got into it, a POF is a proof of funds. Now, obviously, I don't provide a proof of funds, hint, hint, but what it is, it's a bank statement, and it shows that you have the ability, either yourself or through another party, to close on the deal by being financially able to move forward. Now, realtors and sellers will both ask for it just to make sure that you're the real deal, which is why you know what your competition is doing with the proof of funds, like I showed you in a previous lesson. So you can use your own if you can ever find one, perhaps from your competition. You can get one from a lender, or you can pay to get one from a membership site. There are membership sites out there that charge, $600 a year for them to send you a new one every month. This is what it looks like. I've seen some of my competitors using things like this, and so this might be what it looks like when it's sent out to the real estate agent or sent out to the seller as part of our offer. And ask local realtors if there's anything else that you should be aware of locally. Different states have different things, different ways of doing things. Although the basic structure remains the same, there may just be some small minor tweaks that you need to make in a certain market. And remember, when we talk to new real estate agents, we talk to new wholesalers, things like that, we say, look, I'm partners with somebody that's, my team is partnered on hundreds of flips nationwide, but this is the first time we're actually branching out and doing it ourselves. So nobody should be surprised if you say, hey, is there anything we should be aware of locally? This is my first time investing in a property in blank area, South Carolina, whatever it may be. Title and escrow fees are usually the one thing that changes. Sometimes the seller pays all title and escrow fees or closing fees. Sometimes the buyer pays all. Sometimes it's split 50-50. So just be aware of that. Sometimes there's transfer fees, like the city or the county will either charge the buyer or the seller 0.1% of the transaction price to transfer title from the buyer to the seller, from the seller to the buyer, whatever it is. And so just, you can ask a few of those questions. Ask the realtor, hey, since I haven't done anything out there, out of curiosity, how do the closing fees work? The title and escrow, the closing fees. How are the transfer fees? Does the buyer typically handle it out here, or does the seller typically handle it? Survey fees, right? If sometimes, I remember in New Mexico, they required that we have a survey done of the land, or have it as part of the deal. And it's kind of like a disclosure showing you the lot map of the property. It's just another way for them to make money off of you. Then in Texas, they have what's called an option period. That inspection period in the state of Texas is one that needs to be paid for by the buyer. Usually it's like $100, like $10 a day to have an inspection period. So don't be surprised in Texas if that comes up. A lot of people make great money flipping houses in Texas, so don't let that scare you away. Just be aware that that's part of the requirements or part of the formalities in Texas. All right, so regardless of what happens, though, keep pushing forward, be a self-solver. Look, I've done 829 deals now. There's something new every single time. I mean, you're never going to get fully used to it. There's always going to be something that comes out of nowhere. And it's just part of it. Just keep pushing forward, enjoy yourself with it, and understand that this business isn't about knowing everything. It's just about being willing and able to respond when things come up without freaking out. Just keep your cool, network, ask other people how to deal with things. You can ask me how to deal with things, ask my team how to deal with things. Just make sure you stay communicating with the people that are in your local market, with your fellow investors, if anything ever comes up. I mean, with the overwhelming amount of information right now, there's so much information that you're able to do. It's like drinking from a fire hose. You're able to find it out there. So don't be overwhelmed. Become resourceful and go out and get the answers if something comes up. But regardless of what happens, keep moving forward, keep pushing forward, and keep going out and getting what's yours. All right, guys, on the next ones, we're going to talk about the actual contract that we use in this business, both from a realtor standpoint as well as from if you're doing it yourself, if you're doing something to a wholesaler, if you're doing something with somebody who's selling the home for sale by owner. So we'll see you on the next lesson.